Sounds good. We shall resume. So we're going to talk about the economic platforms of the different people, and we're starting to get analysis from different think tanks. Pardon me, about the about them. So let's take a look at some of what we know. So Harris now has a website with issues on it. It's referenced down here in the lower left corner. Easy to spot. You type Kamala Harris issues into or Harris issues into a search window, and it will come up, and you can dig into it. So some of the big ones, lowering, she calls it a new way forward, and it's lower costs for families, affordable health care and education, strengthening Social Security and Medicare, and about 7 or 8 other major planks, and I've kind of summarized them over here. Let me start up in this bucket. So you've got the child tax credit again, which we mentioned earlier was so instrumental in lowering children's poverty rates, and including a 6,000 benefit for newborns, parents with newborns. The child tax credit's more like 3,000 or 3,600, depending on the age of the child. When it's expanded, I forget exactly what the number is now. Is it 1,500? I think. What's the number now? It's like I think 1,500 a child now. So the expanded number was 3,000 or 3,600, and then 6,000 for newborns is pretty serious. The earned income tax credit, expanding that, building the 3 million more rental units for first-time homeowners up to 25,000 in down payment support, and then assisting families with childcare costs. Some of these don't have lots of detail on them. Some of them are just more statements of goals. Expanding the ACA, that's the Affordable Care Act, healthcare, Medicare negotiated pricing to more drugs. Medicare now, or I think the beginning of 2026, will cap. There's a 2,000 cap on out-of-pocket spending. I don't know if the cap on insulin is in now or if it's going in then, but they want to expand that to all citizens, not just for Medicare. Cancel some medical debt. Education, increasing the investment in community college, canceling student loans, scaling up programs for non-college graduates of some of the trades. For Social Security, mainly no cuts in benefits, no change in retirement age, just raising taxes on the rich to pay for these programs. Biden's recent proposal, which she did not say on her site, but his recent proposal was to remove the cap on incomes over 400,000, like I talked about. I said 160. That's where the cap is now, but he's saying remove it only for income over 400. And then also then add a surcharge, so make the tax rate higher for high income people, like over 1 million. Start adding percentages to their taxes that they're paying to help strengthen the program. She has not advocated that. She just said tax the rich more to pay for that. In the middle here, the immigration, she's talking about passing the bipartisan border security bill, a pathway to citizenship. Raising taxes on the rich. She's got some specifics here. I hadn't heard this one before. We already taxed the stock buybacks at 1%. She said she wants to quadruple it, so that would mean 4%. The capital gains tax has been the Republicans are already starting to lie about this, saying it's going to affect everybody. It only affects you if you are very rich. So normal people don't have to worry about anything. If you make less than 400,000, you should you're not going to get taxed more by Harris. And when Republicans lie and say you will, just let it go in one ear and out the other. And also putting in a billionaire minimum tax. So like 15%, or I think is a number that Biden had. I don't know if I've seen the specific number from Harris. Maybe it's there. And then some small business startup help up to 50,000, depending on the scenario. So you can read about all these out there, but there's a sort of an idea they're trying to hang around Harris's neck, which is she doesn't have any policies. She's just a generic Democrat, and you don't know what she stands for. Blah blah blah. The policies are out there. You can argue she can always talk about them more, but she's going all over the country, giving her speech now. All right, now let's turn to Trump's policies, called Agenda 47 for the 47th president. Extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's his tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts for all income levels. Reduce the corporate tax rate further. It had been 35% under Obama. Then it was 21 because of the Tax Cut and Job Act, and now he wants to lower it more to 15. Eliminate the tax on Social Security benefits, eliminate the tax on tips, tariffs on more or all imports, which we'll talk about tariffs in a minute. It's basically a tax increase that offsets some of these tax cuts that are here, depending on the how much money you're making. On immigration, he wants to basically seal the border, deport a lot of the undocumented immigrants that are here. That's virtually a guarantee of a recession because we have 4.5 million boomers retiring or turning 65 and retiring every year. You're going to need a lot of immigrants or our economy is going to slow and go into recession. There's just I can't see any way around it. Similar, actually saying protecting Social Security, but he's saying no cuts in benefits, no change in retirement age, but he's not talking about any kind of tax hike. And what that would mean is if you don't do it, you don't raise taxes, you would have to change the law so that you just fund Social Security via the general fund, which we don't do now, but is not a terrible idea. It's not the end of the world if we did it that way. Then nobody pays more in taxes. We just have much larger deficits. You can make an argument for that. And then over on the other proposals, deregulation, usual Republican stuff, canceling an electric vehicle mandate, building an Iron Dome missile defense shield, stop outsourcing, and arguably that ties probably to his tariffs policy, cut funding for schools, pushing any kind of sort of gender-related stuff. And then he does not mention healthcare in his summary of it. So as you heard in the debate, he's got, what was it, a concept of a plan? One of the memes that came out of there, I have a concept of a plan. Well, he had 4 years and we didn't get much. So other than sabotage of the ACA and, lots and lots of attempts to repeal it, although many of those attempts were also under Obama, some of them were under Trump. So this is sort of his agenda. So let's take a look at what the different groups are saying about it. Goldman Sachs basically says everything's worse under Trump. Economic growth would be lower, inflation would be higher because the tariffs would add to prices, and the budget deficit would be larger, mainly because of the tax cuts. Harris, economic growth would be faster, inflation would be lower, budget deficit would be smaller. This is from the Financial Times. They surveyed 37 professional economists. Most of them are at universities. And here's the graphic. Who would be more inflationary, Trump, Harris, or no difference? 70% said Trump. Who would produce larger federal budget deficits? 70% said Trump. And here is from the Penn-Wharton budget model. This is actually a pretty good source for information about the budget deficits and economic analysis. Although I have to say, I don't really care for this analysis, even though it's very pro-Harris. There seem to be some real problems in their analysis, which I'll explain. But what they're saying here is the debt increase over the next decade would be a lot higher under Trump, mainly because of big loss in revenue relative to the baseline. And what they mean by the baseline is the baseline says all the Trump tax cuts expire. So if Trump is then going to extend them for everyone, that's a big loss in revenue versus the benchmark, almost $6 trillion represented by the Trump tax cuts over a decade. It's more than it was before because the economy is much larger. When you're talking about dollars, it's a much bigger figure. So Harris, what they're saying is about 2.3 trillion more in spending, partially offset by 1.1 trillion higher taxes. So that's the net 1.2. Higher corporate tax rate. Now, one of the issues here, and this is where I actually sent them a question, I didn't get a response yet, but they're saying that based on the way these numbers look, that they're assuming that Harris is letting those Trump tax cuts expire at all levels. And that is not what Harris is likely to do. If you remember Obama, he extended about 80% of the dollars of the Bush tax cuts. So somewhere between here and here, let's call it somewhere in the middle, is probably where Harris would really be if you did this right and assume that Harris is going to extend a lot of those Trump tax cuts, mostly for the middle class, under $400,000. If you added $3 trillion to this number, that wouldn't be crazy, but it's still lower than Trump. It also, the analysis excludes immigration and tariffs. which would significantly impact these numbers. Trump would probably look better on the deficits because the tariffs are a tax. It's going to bring in revenue, but the economy is going to go in the tank, which can also cause deficits to blow up. So they'll have some kind of offsetting effect. I'm not a pro-economist. I haven't seen studies on this. I would guess that if they truly blocked immigration and started deporting a lot of immigrants, that the immigration impact would be larger than the tariffs on the budget deficit. You'd have a lot more unemployed because immigrant spending is everybody else's income. Immigrants buy stuff from native-born people in the stores and buy their services. You ship all those people out. A lot of native-born Americans will lose their jobs. We'll have a recession. So just to keep that in mind with this analysis is pretty incomplete, but it's not inconsistent with the other two things I just showed you. The Penn Wharton also does this distributional analysis. So here are the quintiles. So the bottom 20%, the next 20%, et cetera. So here's the middle class right here. And then the top all the way up to the 95%. I'm going to show you the 96 to 100 in a minute because it blows up the scale. The numbers become gigantic and all these look puny. So when you see the bottom 60% better off under Harris, the blue bar is bigger than the red. Once you get into the 80th percentile or so and up, you start to see a bigger swing over for better off under Trump. And again, this is if Harris were to extend those Trump tax cuts, it's hard to know exactly how that would adjust this. But if she extends it only for the bottom, this is assuming all those tax cuts are going to expire. If she does that, how is that going to affect this number? I'm just not sure. So just keep it in mind as I would not put a lot of weight on this Penn Wharton analysis yet, although it's what you would expect, which is that the bottom is going to be better off under Harris and the rich are going to be better off under Trump because of very big differences in tax policy. It's not a crazy answer they arrive at, but their assumptions are a little odd. And then here's the top 5%, and then we have a bucket for the top 01. Again, the differences in tax policy, very big differences between the two. And I suppose some of this would be Harris's policies like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit also helping down here, but not really here, where these groups might earn too much money to even get the benefit. Those benefits phase out at the top. This is an estimate from the Peterson International Economics Institute or something to that effect. They're saying essentially that tariffs are going to cost the typical household about $2,600 if Trump does that. The prior tariffs, the Congressional Budget Office estimated about $1,300 in 1 year, 2020, from the Trump tariffs in terms of slowing the economy and then making it less efficient, and then the additional income, the tax essentially on people that are buying those imports that are now more expensive. And this is another way of explaining tariffs kind of one thing. Laundry machine prices, when the tariffs were put on them, the prices went up $200, so more than inflation. And then when the tariffs ended, the price fell by $75. Prices are sticky, as you know. And the way tariffs work generally, because the Republicans are doing a lot of lying about this, a tariff is really a middle-class tax increase. It's higher prices that you're going to be paying for all those imported goods, and you don't get away from it because if you switch over to American-made goods, you're going to be paying a higher price too, which is why you were buying the imports or why Walmart was buying the imports to begin with. So you're paying more for stuff. And the import companies, so a U.S. importer is going to be paying Customs and Border Patrol, and then they pass some or all of that cost on to you. That's the mechanism through which it works. The effect can be muted by the import company not passing the cost along if they just take a hit. Or the foreign country may lower its prices before it ever lands at that import company, before it ever hits the dock, so that they can remain more competitive. So it might not be dollar for dollar. There are some things that can slow the impact or reduce the impact of the tariff. There are other considerations with tariffs beside pricing. Tariffs can protect certain U.S. industries from lower price foreign competition. But if you buy domestic, you're going to be paying more. So either way, you're paying more. And it can protect some jobs. But because people are spending more in a particular industry to buy those things, they have less money to spend in other industries, so jobs are lost there. This is that efficiency argument that trade is efficient. You're buying the goods you want for the lowest possible price, and that leaves the more money to spend on other things. So there are a variety of things, but the idea that tariffs won't raise prices is ridiculous on its face, and you should disregard that. If someone is making an argument that we should be protecting a particular industry, we want to protect the US steel industry because we think we might go to war, or we want to protect solar panels because we want to grow that industry here and have everybody creating a lot of jobs in that sector. From a green energy perspective, we don't want to be dependent on China for that. There could be reasons for tariffs, but just don't buy the tariffs are better for the economy or overall, or tariffs aren't going to raise prices. They are going to raise prices. They're going to make the economy less efficient, which is why these guys, which are a fairly conservative, pro-business kind of group, say it's going to cost us. When all else fails, ask the AI what they think. So I asked Chat GPT. I said, unions have some of these same issues that tariffs have, meaning they make stuff more expensive in a particular industry. You're theoretically paying more for a US car because the union workers are getting paid a lot more money. The producer is going to charge more for the car. That's fair. There are other benefits to this. It's not all about price. There's a lot of other considerations. And I thought this was a really nice summary that the AI put together. There's worker rights and protections. Unions can make safer working conditions, more reasonable hours, so you can have a better life. And those wages are spent in the economy. They go to the worker first, but there's a cycle. They go back to other people. There's equality issues. Collective bargaining can help with actually happier workers, means they don't quit. There's some benefits to the corporation of not just they don't like paying more, but at the same time, they got a better workforce. And then unions can have a lot of political influence, as you're seeing here, where everybody's buying for different unions to support them. The tariffs, the anti-tariff arguments I mentioned already, so you can read through those. And then when you want to combine both, you say, if you're trying to kind of thread the needle or be in the middle, you say, I want trade policies that protect workers' rights globally. I want to see higher wages everywhere in the world. I want to see laws protecting workers and limiting the 80-hour work weeks. And you probably all heard the story years ago when Chinese workers started jumping off the roof of one of the big manufacturers over there. What did they do? They put nets around the roof. So they couldn't kill themselves by jumping off the roof. They didn't raise their wages. I mean, that's the kind of nonsense that goes on in the world when you have a very hardcore capitalist dictatorship in charge of things. Economic growth, the more efficient the economy, the faster it's going to grow, and that raises all boats, or most of them. And then, you use tariffs, kind of cut the middle. Don't raise tariffs on everything. You use them for strategic reasons, and you do the least damage to the overall economy. So I thought that was a pretty nice summary from our AI friend. When it comes to immigration, which I think is one of the biggest, most important economic issues of this election, it's going to be about what happens with immigrants, because your economy is driven by people buying stuff. And if Harris is going to have a lot more people here, they're going to buy a lot more stuff. Your economy is going to grow. That's just what it is. And so the Congressional Budget Office is saying over a decade, robust immigration is going to add nearly $9 trillion to GDP. That's about 65,000 a household, more income. GDP is production, but it's also income. And as I said, immigrant spending is our income, or our meaning domestic born, native born, and vice versa. And they also reduced the deficit by nearly $1 trillion because they are paying more taxes in and more than they take out. So they're younger, they're workers, they're paying in, and they're not taking stuff out yet. If we restrict that, we lose that wealth, that income. And if we deport people, then we actually shrink. Not only do we not get the 65,000, then you're starting to talk about negatives. And the boomers, Now, the boomers are turning 65 each year. That doesn't mean those 4.4 million are going to retire. But some of the 4.4 million that turned 65 last year are retiring this year, and 2 years before that are retiring this year. So it's going to be around that 4.4 million number. It's just not going to be layered like that. It's not going to be the immediate people turning 65 that are retiring. Some will work longer, but it's a big number. And there's a lot of racist nonsense going on out there about how white people are being replaced by brown people. And it's not, it's just demographics. We are aging and people are retiring. And so a lot of the workers are going to be Latin or Asian. They are not going to be white people, and in some cases they are, but for the most part, you're talking about people from Central and South America coming here. All right. Another big lie is this idea that we're being invaded by immigrants, that we're being overrun, that there's so many immigrants here, the United States can't digest them. So when you look at the actual numbers, there's a fantastic fact check on this where I was able to get these numbers, and they're cited to other sources as well. And I'm familiar with where to get these numbers right from the Border Patrol. So they're not crazy. You hear these numbers like 10 million illegals, 12 million, 15 million coming in. First of all, there's a lot of immigrants that are leaving. Undocumented immigrants come here, they work for a long time. Some of them turn 65, they go home. The New York Times reported that the number of undocumented immigrants has been pretty consistent around 10 million for the past several years, peaked at 12 million in 2008. Even with a large number of new arrivals on the border, and this article is from 2023, it's just not, there's a lot of coming in and a lot of going out. And then when you look at the unauthorized immigrants that actually the Border Patrol dealt with, so of the 8 million, Border Patrol says we took 6.5 million into custody at the border, and we estimate about 1.6 million got away. They've been doing this forever. They have ways of estimating how many got into the country without being detected. When you break this 6.5 million down, they released 2.9 million, and they're waiting for courts generally to process them. There's a huge asylum background. These people are here legally. They're not illegals. They're waiting for adjudication. They are allowed to be here. This group, 2.8 million, was immediately expelled. I don't know what the noun for that is. They were subject to immediate expulsion. They were expelled, I don't think is a word. They were sent home. And then 0.8 were transferred to ICE, which are generally incarcerated or sent home. So what you've really got is the 1.6 that snuck in and the 2.9 that were released. The country has 330 million people. This is not an immigration. This is not an invasion. These 2.9 are here, blessed by the Border Patrol. The gotaways are the ones that are what you think of as the people that sneak in, and that is a tiny number. And we have a lot of relative to the size of the country and the number of people. And we have again, people are leaving, so it's not. This is just what's coming in. This is not all the going out. All right, this is what's coming and going in over the past couple of years. This is not taking into account all the ones that leave that have been here 10 or 15 years and decide to go home. That's not in this graph. So I recommend reading that New York Times article. If you are nervous about immigrants taking over the United States, that is the least of your worries. You should be worried about immigrants being deported, which will hurt you and your pocketbook significantly. In terms of, Biden did an executive order recently that got a lot of press in June, but already the border encounters were falling. So this is monthly border encounters going back to October of 2023, and this is September 2024. They don't have the data for that yet, so it's really July is the latest. The numbers were already falling quite a bit when Biden put that rule in. He did it for political cover. He sort of had to, but it wasn't him for the most part that did it. And here's where that law went in, or that executive order went in over here. This is comparing different years. You can see the orange line, which is 2024, is lower than the prior years. It was already lower even before. So again, the idea that we're in invasion is a baloney premise. One chart I didn't show you, which is an important chart, is the backlog of the asylum seekers, which is about 3 million as of a few months ago. That's a large number, and that you need legislation to solve. You can't solve that with an executive order. You can't. There are laws around. Somebody comes and says, "I'm seeking asylum because there's a credible threat to my life." in the dictatorship where I'm from, they get a hearing. That's legal. They're allowed to do that. On another common lie that we hear is the violent crime. So, the crime rate is about 26% below the Trump peak, and immigrants commit fewer crimes than native born. After a couple of generations, they catch up, but violent crimes are lower. These people are trying to maintain a low profile. They're here working. They don't want to get caught doing stupid stuff. They are very careful. And then over time, their kids and others, they get a little more aggressive and they start acting like the natives. But violent crime is down. Notice that violent crime every year under Biden, this is FBI data, 21, 2, 3, and 4, all lower than under Trump. Every year under Biden has been lower than Trump. All right. Anything on that section on the candidate proposals? I guess the violent crime is sort of a bonus. That wasn't in it, but the immigration is a huge part of this argument. I think I've said before, I think the major issue is the other major issue is abortion. Abortion is going to get the women out, and immigration is going to get the men out, and we go from there. We'll see who shows up. All right. Questions? I'm going to look at the chat. I didn't hear anything. Any questions, comments? All right. I'm not hearing anyone. Can someone speak in case I've been disconnected? Are you guys all there? Is Christine home?
We're here.
All right, good. I went for a long time. I didn't get interrupted, so I kept going. I'm pausing here. If there are any questions or items you want to talk about, let me know. Otherwise, we will proceed.
So we're all going to stay quiet to tease David, right?
Yeah, I'll just talking to myself for 40 minutes. Oh, no. I've done that before, by the way, but it's not the first. All right, so a couple slides on action, and then we'll talk about these. At least we'll walk you through what's in the appendices, and then we can have a conversation. I'm not going to dwell on each slide like I just did. So this is a summary of a lot of the key statistics adjusted for inflation where applicable, so that's real. 2019 and 2023. You guys have been seeing this thing for months, and then I've also been sharing it online. So those of you that have been repeating it, I did two things with this. I added in the preliminary benchmark revision for 2023 only, and I added in the real median household income numbers. So we threw a bone to Trump. This is one thing that is better under Trump. Everything else on here is better under Biden in 2023. There's a version of this graph that also has 2022. In some cases, when you look at the real net worth numbers, they were better in 2022 than 2023. But for the most part, same story. 2022 to 2023, better than 2019. I think 2024 is going to look a lot more like 2019. Trump will probably end up ahead. The 2019 numbers will probably be a little better than 2024 on some of these measures. Not a lot. The unemployment rate, for example, is going to be higher in 2024 than 2019. It's going to be in the fours. The job creation is probably going to be a little slower than 166, but these other numbers will probably be just as good or better under Biden. Stock market's going to be way better. All right. Here's another version of the same chart. I just added a disclaimer here, basically saying after the benchmark, this would be 194. For those of you that, by the way, that are Fred people, there's probably one or two of you that use Fred on here beside me. Fred doesn't include the benchmark yet. I think they don't include it until the official revision in January. Then they'll restate what's in the database, if I remember correctly. Here is this. I did a short version of this presentation here. So there's like 10 or 12 slides from this presentation on Twitter that you can get, and you can share it very easily. And you can cut and paste copy the images out of Twitter and share them very easily if we don't use the cutting tool. And let me show you that, by the way. Let me escape out of here for a minute. Christine, am I just showing the small version now?
You're showing...
What are you seeing?
I'm seeing your normal edit mode.
Okay, good. All right. So but you guys can see like the bottom of my screen down here.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let me show you how this cutting tool works. So let's say I want to share this slide. This is the cutting tool, and you can or snipping tool. You can find it in here. If you look up like snipping tool or something, it'll come up. There's the shortcut right there, and you can put it at the bottom of your screen. It's always there. And what it does is when you click on it, it's going to prompt you. And all you do is you would click on new. I just click this, and I highlight this, and I've got it now. I'm going to right click on this and copy it, and I can paste it anywhere in the universe. It's that easy. So I'm going to do that again. I click on the snipping tool. I go to new, and then I draw the box, and then I just copy, and I'm ready to put it anywhere in the world. You can also save this if you wanted. File, save as, you can save it. You can do different things with it. So if you don't know how to use that cutting tool, if you go to YouTube or other places, you're going to have videos of exactly how to find it and put it down here, but it's really easy. If you just type snipping tool into the search window in Windows, you're going to find it. And it takes a little work, but you'll be able to figure out how to put it down here at the bottom with everything else. And you can cut and paste any slide. Doesn't have to be in PowerPoint. You can cut a PDF. You can cut anything you want. You see a slide you like in a New York Times article or anything else. If you can't just flat out save it, you can cut it and paste it. One thing I do from an efficiency standpoint is I will set up like a PowerPoint, like this presentation, and cut and paste slides that I like throughout the month, and then I share them with you guys. So I'm building this presentation throughout the month where I'm using third parties stuff and just putting it out there. So like on Twitter, I found these guys. A guy I highly recommend you follow on Twitter is Stephen Ratner. These are his charts. I should have put them on here. I should have given him credit, but he's cited his sources on here. But the Stephen Ratner, he worked for the Obama administration. He was part of the auto industry turnaround. He was part of helping them get through the bankruptcy, and he does great work with graphs. He's the MSNBC guy, so you've probably seen him on TV. He's their chart guy, and he's on Morning Joe all the time explaining the economy, kind of like I do. He's the famous version of me, infinitely more famous. So that's the cutting tool. Let me go back to presentation mode again. Are we back in the right place, Christine?
Yes.
Excellent. She's training me well on how to do this. All right. So let's talk about what we've got in this appendix. I'm not going to chat about every one, but we can go back to them if you see one you like. So, Biden's got the lowest unemployment rate of any president. The unemployment rate falls under Democrats, goes up under Republicans. Biden has the highest average real hourly wage, dollars per hour. GDP growth is about the same under Biden as it was under Trump before the pandemic, and he was ahead of it for a while. In terms of real net worth, average is much higher under Biden than anybody else, and Trump is actually a ways down. In his defense, don't share this, but Trump did have a very large increase during his administration. This number was very low at the end of the Biden administration. So Trump did have a nice jump, but not up here. We were in great shape because of the housing and stock market gains. You heard Bill Clinton. He reprised a famous quote from years ago. If you look since the end of the Cold War in '89, America has created 51 million new jobs. What's the score? Democrats 50, Republicans 1. That is accurate. Bush, and Trump have had crappy job creation. And in fact, Trump was negative and more or less wiped out the other guys, only 1 million. And Democrats are up 50. That's pretty good. Here's the overall change. Democrats plus 88, Republicans plus 32 since World War II. Average change in employment. I didn't put the averages by Democrat and Republican. It's a lot higher under Democrats. It's like, what is it, Karl, like 150 to 90 or something like that? I'd have to look it up. It's been a while, but blue lines are bigger, much bigger. The budget deficit tends to go up under Republicans because 10 of the last 11 recessions started under Republicans. They also cut taxes for the rich, and Democrats raised them. We had a request for housing. Is the gentleman that asked for the housing stuff on this call or still on the call? Wondering if they are. They are on mute. So the basic plan that Harris is talking about is build. Well, Biden said that, but she's got the same plan. Build 3 million more rental units and homes and start whacking some of the corporate landlords. To be determined how to do that, because I don't know that the laws are real easy for that. And then help the first-time homeowners. So we covered her policies earlier. That's kind of the sketch of it. The new residential construction, this is typically, it gives you a sense of how much building is going on. And so this was in July, and these are the numbers. So it goes through a life cycle. So you have a permit first, then there are starts, and then after a while, there are completions. And that takes about 8 months for single units and about 17 months for 2 units to play out. And here are some statistics so you can put this in perspective. The gray bar is the average from 2015 to 2019. Orange is February of 2020, so right before the pandemic. And the blue is this July numbers, these numbers brought over. These are annualized. So this is, you would divide this by 12 to see how many new building permits or new starts or new completions you had in the month. And you can see here that more permit starts and completions than the 2015 to 19 average, but only if the completions are higher than February 2020. Only the blue bar is higher than the orange bars for complete. Blue's only higher for the completed. It's not higher here for starts. It's not higher here for permits, although they are pretty close. So this gives you some insight into what's going to happen in the future. Permits are looking pretty good. Starts are a little slow. Probably people are delaying them with higher interest rates. And the completions are good from a while back. Housing prices really got high, and this is real, so this is adjusted for inflation. Peaked at about 470,000 in today's dollars. Now they've fallen all the way to 412. The nominal number, they're still pretty close to their high, but not all the way. So prices have fallen from their peaks. And this is the median sale prices of houses sold in the United States. So if we had a little housing bubble there, it's been deflating. I really like this measure, and I did a measure like this for rent a while ago. And we've got the questions today on rent, so I'll dig into that for our next meeting. But a cool way of seeing how expensive stuff is to see how many hours of work it takes. How long do you have to work? It gives you a sense of the wages and how they compare to the price of the thing. So here's the median sales price of the house in terms of how many hours of work it takes to this average hourly wage that I've been sharing with you, that $30 an hour. How many hours does it take? So we're down to a pretty normal number now. If you look at 2016 to 2020, it was a little bit lower right before the pandemic, but it's pretty typical going back at least, to the post, when the housing market got back to more normal after the Great Recession. But this is not an unusual number right now, but it got pretty high. For a while, it was really crazy, almost 16,000 hours versus like 13,000 something. This shows that you hear in the news all the time about a housing affordability crisis. That may be true in some of the renting areas, but when it comes to the home ownership rate, the green shows higher than 2019. So I've shared this slide before. In general, regardless of the age of the householder, we have a higher ownership rate. We had a higher ownership rate in 2023 and higher in 2024. And the number here lately for that under 35 group is just slightly lower. After being higher, it's just slightly lower. Everybody else, till you get into the elderly, is lower, is above, is better. Green is better. If you want to learn about the housing data, the National Association of Realtors does a lot of the data for the last year. But to go farther back, you gotta find somebody that actually has access to the data set and is willing to share it. And here's Wells Fargo. They shared the data going back all the way to 2000. This is existing home sales volumes. Won't surprise you that in the housing bubble before the Great Recession, it was crazy high. Got pretty high here too. And now it's pretty low. The 4 million homes is a very low level of sales historically because of relatively high interest rates generally. And then here's some data. The sales in units, the number in inventory, which is more like a million. More like a million in inventory, about 4 million being sold. And so about the black line on the right axis, 4 months worth of inventory, about a third of a year. Most mortgages have a rate below 5. So even though the mortgages went up and buying one now is expensive, a lot of those 30-year mortgages were set years ago or before those interest rates started going up, right? They're 30-year mortgages. So when you weigh all this out, a lot of the mortgages are very low. Like this is 3 to 4%. This is less than 3. That's 60% of it, right? 65% of it is below 4. And the average overall is less than 5. So that's one of the things that the Fed, even though mortgage rates go up, it doesn't affect everybody that owns a house. It's just the people that want to sell and buy are affected, but there's a giant stock of homes out there that are people aren't selling. Here's a forecast for mortgage rates. They're going to go down. We'll see how fast, but this is by from now to 2026 coming down. They've already come down some. And that's it. All right. I will stop there. What time is it? Eight. Well, right. We beat the 2 hour mark. Woo.